Bias against female pilots. I'm returning to the question of gender bias in society today. It's been on my mind a lot lately, and perhaps because in some ways I think it continues to be one of our blind spots. In the USA, and I imagine this is reflected across the Western world, only 4.4% of the airline transport pilot certificate holders are women. Furthermore, only 1.8% are African American, 1.5% Asian, and 8% Hispanic or Latino. In other words, it's heavily dominated by white males. These figures are cited in an article published in the journal Technology and Society in 2021. I'll leave a link to that below. But I will say that I could only access the abstract of that article and a few snippets from it, and I was dependent upon a journalistic report about the article for much of this information. It's often a problem trying to access these journals. They want to charge you $30, $40 for each journal that you try to access. I'll leave a link to that journalistic report below as well. This particular study aimed to investigate consumer gender and ethnic bias towards commercial airline pilots and also flight students in the United States. Unsurprisingly, participants in this study tended to give higher likely performance ratings to white males based solely on photographs they were shown. I say unsurprisingly, to me at least. I think there's a tendency in society today to think that the issue of gender bias in particular has largely been overcome. We've fixed that problem, right? In fact, the pendulum may have begun to swing the other way, that women are overreaching. Well, I think studies like this about our attitudes towards pilots show that this is far from true. This particular study didn't even try to address issues such as equal opportunity in terms of acquiring the skills required, or any employment bias, or any structural bias against women because of the way the industry is structured. This is a whole other host of issues that women need to deal with. This is simply about our attitudes towards women in this position. People expect white males to be better pilots than women, and of course, better than people of any other ethnicity. I can only expect that those within the industry whose job it is to select, train and promote pilots share these biases, at least to some extent. This is far more important than just the obvious attitudinal bias. It's generally agreed that we're heading towards a severe shortage of pilots, both due to the impending retirement of the current cohort and also the rapid expansion of this industry over the next decade or so. To meet this growing need, it will be essential to overcome this attitudinal bias so that previously untapped groups within the community, namely women and other ethnic groups, can be recruited to fill these positions. Now, as I mentioned, as with many of these papers, I wasn't able to access the full text, only the abstract, a few snippets, and that journalistic report. But I'd be very interested to know, for instance, whether women participants in this study also shared this bias. If that's the case, you can see how this would potentially inhibit women from pursuing this career path in the first place. This is not the only profession in which such gender-biased attitudes have been identified. In a 2017 survey of American patients, nearly 60% preferred a male surgeon over a female surgeon, even though there's absolutely no evidence that gender affects surgical competence. A review article published in 2021 identified a whole range of issues standing in the way of female surgeons. I'll leave a link to that below. And that article I could actually access in full. It's from the Public Library of Science. Among the barriers that female surgeons faced was being perceived to be less competent or inferior to their male counterparts by hospital staff and colleagues. Female surgeons and surgical trainees found it harder to command authority, as patients and hospital staff tended to dismiss them and trusted more in male colleagues. I think it's important to keep raising these issues because it's easy to become complacent and to think that all of these issues have been addressed. There are still many, often unconscious, biases that remain in our society and which can serve as barriers for women. I'm sure I hold some of these biases myself. I try to catch myself, certainly before opening my mouth. This is part of what is disparagingly referred to as being woke. It's about being sensitive to these issues in society and within ourselves. It's about being self and other aware, i.e. woke. I'm happy to claim the word woke for myself, at least as an aspiration, if not yet as a reality. I also think it's important to point out issues like this to counter an ever-increasing, or maybe just ever louder, cry from some middle-class privileged white men that somehow they are the ones who are being discriminated against. Nice try, guys.